in clear and concrete ways the lies that are being perpetuated about Europeans being in any type of specific danger in Azania or South Africa simply because they're Europeans. So glad you're able to join us for this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices. And we, of course, give respect and honor to the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere. We were really inspired last week during all of the African Liberation Day programming, um, including the one in person that we had here in Oakland, California, with the words of the people native to these lands and how the pleas for us to unite and be organized in our uh, fight against this oppressive empire that has subjugated all of our peoples. So just want to acknowledge thinking about that and the words that they mentioned, because these are words that ring true to all people who are really serious about justice, right? So there's that. And then also our African ancestors, of course, we always want to acknowledge them. They are always the reason why we're here. They have sacrificed so much for us, and most of us do so little to honor that sacrifice. So we want to make sure that we constantly lift it up here. Okay, so we're glad that you're here. And then just to start, for those that may not be as familiar, Our Ancestors' Voices, this program is sponsored each week, same time, same platforms, by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. It's not sponsored by any corporation, no entrepreneurs, none of that. It's sponsored by this independent, revolutionary, pan-African political party that is based in Africa. And we have one objective, which is to achieve Pan-Africanism. And Pan-Africanism, correctly defined, is the total liberation and unification of Africa under one scientific socialist government. This can only happen, of course, through a revolutionary process, and that's the work that we're engaged in, this process of organizing for revolutionary consciousness, which is the first stage of any revolution. And then there are the other stages, the organization of the various sectors of the society, and then the armed struggle against the empire that you're fighting against. All of these are stages of revolution. We are in this first stage, which is winning the hearts and minds of our people over to the concept that Pan-Africanism, once achieved, is the key to solving all of our problems. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is outlined in pretty clear terms in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, which is the covers displayed on your page here. And it's simply a book that talks about, and Nkrumah goes to great lengths to explain that Pan-Africanism is a mass objective. And so it can only be achieved with the organization of the masses of African people. So that means organizing and uniting all of the revolutionary Pan-African formations on the ground in Africa. And that, friends, enemies, is the primary work of the All African People's Revolutionary Party today. It's not a theory, it's not a hope, it's not a dream, it's the actual on the ground work that we are engaged in. And this particular program, we have many, but this particular program is sponsored every Sunday, like I mentioned, same time, same place, each week by myself and Dr. Shakura Umi, who is here with us. We're in the same place, which is nice, hosting this program. So what we want to do is I just want to turn it over to Shakura to get us started.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate you. Hello, everyone. Yes, yes. So thank you so much for being with us today. And I echo everything that Baba Jamu said about still celebrating African Liberation Day and also still continuing to keep in mind what the themes were that we were celebrating this year as we continue to take the impact of ALD that it had on us even in our daily lives and our personal lives and our social circles, however you see yourself and whatever space you see yourself in. That's going to be really important, especially now that ALD is over with. We don't want to necessarily just embrace it and stand for it because we're in the event and we're literally practicing it, but we want to see how we can apply it in the rest of our lives. I think one of the most profound things that I appreciate about being in work study so far that I've learned is this concept of the revolutionary African personality that exists within the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And basically, to me, that concept is so profound because it talks exactly about what we are trying to get you all to exercise. What we are trying to exercise ourselves is that how do we continue to take the ideologies that we believe in, the principles? As I sit in this room, I'm reading quotes by Kwame Ture, Malcolm X, Kwame Nkrumah, even Marcus Garvey. So, how do we take these quotes that we believe in? How do we memorize these quotes that we would stand for? We would literally give our life for these quotes, right? And then, how do we take that outside of these spaces that we find ourselves in where those quotes are necessary to recite? And how do we use that when we're on the freeway 5 hours from now and someone cuts us off? How do we use that ideology when we're in the grocery store just to pick up on something quick and somebody cuts us in line or calls us out of our name or shoves us or whatever that looks like, right? So these are like, this is where the principle really comes into play, right? Because we don't need to demonstrate for everybody here that we are who we are. Everybody here knows who we are. That's why you all are here. That's why we hope that you will return and come back every week. It really comes into play when you get to practice it in a space where people may not know who you are, but you're still trying to be principled. So for us, that could look like practicing humanitarianism, practicing egalitarianism, practicing what it means to be a collectivist, right? Even in spaces where those terms are not even understood, nor would they ever be applied. And I think even if we are to talk about, what's happening in Azania, we could still look at what that looks like. How do we continue to seek information and knowledge about a topic that we probably don't know that much about and accepting that and just, diving headfirst into being open to learn and grow. So starting with that conversation, we can think about how Pan Africanists usually call the country most commonly known as, quote, South Africa as Azania. The roots in Azania have a background in Zulu folklore language, meaning, quote, the land of Black people, end quote. And Azania is a land of immense treasures. We could think about the gold, the diamonds, the uranium, the steel, the zinc. We could even think about the Venetian diamond mine, which is one of the world's largest diamond mines. We could also even think about how, excuse me, that Venetian diamond mine is definitely supplying large supplies of cheap diamonds to the world market, especially, you guessed it, to the Zionist state of Israel, which today produces 40% of the polished diamonds on the world market, while zero diamond mines exist in occupied Palestine or the colonized term of Israel. And so this is such an important thing to think about because we've already talked to you in great detail about the connection between the Palestinian struggle for their land and the African struggle for our land. And we've also talked in great detail about how these diamonds are being taken from parts of Africa and shipped to occupied Palestine land to be cleaned and then sold to all these diamond jewelry companies that you can think of, from De Beers to Jared to whoever the other ones are that I can't think of right now. Meanwhile, none of that profit goes to Palestinian people or their struggle or supporting their struggle for that matter. And none of that profit goes to African people. And we also have talked about the health complications of mining for diamonds and the black lungs and the respiratory issues, the allergies, the other things that our people are immensely suffering from at the cost of mining for diamonds and not making any type of wage that is livable, at least, not to mention not being able to have a longer quality of life because now their health is impacted, which could very much have ramifications on them passing away sooner than later. I would make the argument that if there are health impacts on the African side of mining for the diamonds, there's probably some health impacts on the Palestinian side with the polishing taking place and whatever chemicals are existing in the air, releasing in the air as Palestinian people are breathing them in. And so I think that there is more to be said about that. And this is exactly why, if you watched the ALD broadcast, then you understood why we had a Palestinian speaker at an African event. This is exactly why Palestinian organizations like the Palestinian Liberation Organization have been very welcoming and inviting us to speak in their spaces. And this is why that relationship is so key, because for some of us, we understand that their struggle is our struggle, and we also understand that our struggle is their struggle. And here you see, right here on the slide, that Azania is one of the main ways that Palestine is continuing to be exploited, while Azanian land and African soil is also being exploited. And I think it's also important to note, even seeing the Venetian diamond mine in the bottom left corner, we even can think about local ethnic groups such as the Zulu and the Osha, how they have contributed mightily to the world culture for thousands of years. And so I think it's important to just kind of break that down and think more about that. And I also want to say that even as we think more about this kind of from an introductory level, which is usually my part and what I try my best to do before Baba Ajamu speaks, we should also be thinking about how power is defined in terms of being able to determine how things are understood, how media is controlled, how media is released to the rest of us to be received. Somebody in a position of power gets to decide what is being said, how it's being said, and to what level that message is being received. And I think it's also important for us to connect it to, Europeans in positions of power and how they have malicious intent because of white supremacy, because of imperialism, right? And taking, one country's resources to bully another country, right? And even capitalism, where this ideology consistently says that basically, if you don't have access to a lot of material resources, profit, money, things that you could sell for profit, then you are determined as less significant, and even classism to that extent. So, speaking continuously on these Europeans, they have viciously colonized and brutally harmed the people of Azania, developing an inhumane apartheid system. And apartheid is a so-called Afrikaner or Dutch word, which means separate, right? So the apartheid system required that Africans needed to be regulated to specific areas at all times, and they need to carry identification that basically signifies where they can go. The education and access to resources is restricted, and it's also very strict for these Africans on how they can receive these things, because you guessed it, it's controlled by European power, and these Europeans are prohibiting Africans from doing what they need to do. Under this backwards system, which existed in 1994, Europeans hoarded the wealth of the country while subjugating Africans to oppressive slavery conditions. And I think it's important to just continue to see the connections. You see the picture, say no to racism, defy apartheid. We don't want to separate those two. We want to see that apartheid, as we just pointed out, is defined as a Dutch term, which means it's colonial in root. And you also know that it was something that was brought into Africa to be done to Africans. So I think it's important for us to break these down and to see how this connection exists. And as I said, don't forget to tie in how capitalism is at the seat of the table here. Don't forget to tie in how classism is at the seat of the table. Don't forget to tie in how white supremacy is the root of a lot of this, because Europeans are in a position of power for now, but it's up to us to educate ourselves by increasing our political education so that we can understand A, what the problem really is, meaning being able to define apartheid, and B, then being able to do the research so that we can learn from our ancestors on ways to resist it. We can learn how Azapo, for example, this organization out of Azania, how they've been working for years to resist it. We can contribute to them. We can help them. We can support them. We can support other organizations that are working to resist apartheid. We can support the All African People's Revolutionary Party because Azapo is one of our sibling organizations. So this is where all of that kind of lays out, you all. It's not enough for us to just sit back and listen. We have a responsibility to change the conditions for Azanian people. Even if you never step foot in Azania, you should see it as your personal goal to change those conditions because, as we've already said, their struggle is your struggle and your struggle is our struggle. And I think that if you identify as a European and you are suffering under capitalism, you should still see this as your struggle. I think that if you identify as a male and you are suffering under patriarchy because you don't make enough money under patriarchy, you should see this struggle as your struggle. And I think that regardless of how you identify, you're probably experiencing some type of oppression. If not classism, then maybe capitalism, if not more, intersected in top of that. So, because of that, all of these issues impact all of us. That's the moral of the story. And the only way we're going to be able to change it is if we increase our political education. We always say that if you're not going to join some organization that's working for justice, then you should start your own. And we think that there's a lot to be said with that because we're not going to be able to make the changes that we need to make if many of us are not willing to put ourselves out there and physically do the work. You know, I was talking to Baba Ajamu about the self-defense trainings that he's doing each week on Thursday. And I asked him, I said, are you putting this information in, like entering this as data, if you will, into the party's website? Because I think that for a lot of people, they see the All African People's Revolutionary Party as this militant Pan Africanist organization, but they don't see the value of self defense trainings and how we need to know how to defend ourselves connected with the Pan Africanist struggle. I think if we were to put those kind of things on the website, especially people who are local, who may not know about the defense training, first, they would have the opportunity to learn about our organization, but B, they also would be able to see how it's connected. We don't want to just be able to teach you how to defend yourself, but we want you to defend yourself ideologically as well as physically, right? So being able to really make those connections, I think, is going to be key. And the best way we can do that is by educating ourselves. We've already talked about how we can't rely on the system to do that for us. And at this point, we know surely, especially because people are just making up nonsense that is not based on evidence, it's not based on truth, in positions of power, by the way, and just saying whatever they want to say. So we know that we can't rely on media to do that, not capitalist media anyway. We can't rely on that, which means we have to find other more credible sources that we can trust to be able to get the information that we want. Now, if you're okay with just spewing out rhetorical BS that's not based on evidence, then this message is not for you. But I'm assuming the overwhelming majority of us, especially those of us who've been coming consistently, I'm pretty sure you want to base what it is you're speaking based on integrity, based on humanity, and based on fact, based on truth, because that's the only way that we're going to achieve our freedom. We have to speak the truth and we have to be truthful about how we plan to resist. And being able to communicate those things is going to be really valuable. So, with that, I will pass it back to Comrade Ajamu. And we thank you so much. And let's keep the struggle going. I slipped, sorry.
Thank you, Shakura. Thank you very much. And I just want to reiterate a couple of things Shakur said before we continue on with this. And that's that an entire system was created by the European colonizers of Azania. And apartheid was a manifestation of that system. But this entire system operated for hundreds of years with the purpose of brutally exploiting the African masses to control all of the resources in Azania. That was the whole purpose of that. So it's important to see it in that context because now these no good crackers are running around talking about somebody's committing genocide against them. If you don't understand that history and you don't understand the systemic violence and oppression that our people have experienced in that region of our African homeland for centuries, then you'll be duped into believing these lies that are coming out today. And I want to say that despite that oppression that they reaped out against us, of course, we always fought back, right? We always fought back against this oppression. At no time did we not fight back against this oppression. And some of the manifestations that illustrated how we did that in 1912, the African National Congress, or the ANC, was founded. And this organization was founded with the intent of struggling against the racist apartheid system. And it did that for several decades. Excuse me, allergic to capitalism. Sorry. It did that for several decades. But in 1957, there was a split within the ANC, or the African National Congress. They had what they called a Congress of African Peoples that took place in the country. And out of that formation, a split came out. There were Africans that uh, resisted and challenged the ANC slogan from the ANC's Freedom Charter, which reads "One man, one vote, one man, one vote." And there were many people that disagreed with that. They felt that these Europeans had come over and colonized Africa, and that they should have no legal rights to anything in Africa. At the very least, we should not be bestowing equal status to them that we don't even have in Africa. So uh, a number of formations came out of that. First was the Pan Africanist Congress, using the correct name of Azania. So the PAC of Azania, which instead of adopting the ANC's slogan of one man, one vote, took up the slogan "One settler, one bullet." And that's still the slogan today: one settler, one bullet. And then a couple of years after that, in 1960, Shakur mentioned Azapo, the Azanian People's Organization, emerged as a result of the Sharpeville uprising. And if you don't know about the Sharpeville uprising, what that was is our people sick and tired of being forced to have to carry these passbooks. When you were African in Azania, you had to carry this book that had all of your identifying characteristics in it. You had to keep it on you 24/7. You couldn't even go and take a dump without having the passbook on you. Because if these European uh, settlers caught you without a passbook, you would be instantly arrested, and you would oftentimes be imprisoned for the rest of your life, a long period of time, if you were not out and out murdered. I mean, that's how brutal the oppression existed against our people. So Azapo formed as a result of our people rising up against these passbook terrorism against us. And we had rebellions in Sharpsville. We call them rebellions. We don't call them riots, because riots means people just rise up and they don't really have a legitimate reason. Our people in Azania, our people in Britain, our people in Australia, our people all over this backward cesspool, when we rise up and resist, we always have every reason to do that. So uprising is the appropriate word. And after the Sharpsville uprising, the Azanian People's Organization came into existence. And now today, you see the logos on the screen for ANC and PAC and Azapo. And PAC and Azapo have been working to bring about unity between those two organizations and make those two organizations pretty much one organization. And that's an ongoing struggle that the APRP is active in encouraging. We have people in that region who are members of PAC and Azapo, and we're doing that work. I look forward to going there later this year to contribute to that work. So this is the history of resistance. And Nelson Mandela, of course, was a longtime ANC leader who was released from prison after 27 years in 1990. It says 1994. 94 was the year that the country uh, gained its so-called political independence. So that typo was my fault. But in 1990, Mandela was released from prison. But you should know, as we've said many times in this program, that the reason why Mandela was released, it was a part of the negotiated settlement, because Cuba, under the leadership of Fidel Castro, had sent approximately 500,000 Cuban troops to Azania. between the mid 80s and the early 90s. And the reason why this happened is because at that time, these racist Europeans in Southern Africa, they wanted to consolidate their control. They had been engaged in this struggle of resistance, of armed resistance by the ANC, and then now they had, AMC had its armed wing called Spear of the Nation in English, Mkuntu Izizwe, Spear of the Nation, and the PAC had its military apparatus. The Azapo had its military apparatus. There was the Black Consciousness Movement as well. And so they could see the handwriting on the wall that independence was coming. And so they, in their blind effort to maintain white supremacy in that region, instead of them accepting that handwriting on the wall, they decided to openly resist it. And so they began to organize and apply pressure all throughout the region, not just in Azania, but in Zimbabwe, in Angola, Mozambique, Namibia, Zambia, all of those countries in that region to strengthen racist apartheid and to try to create a white settler state of all of Southern Africa. That was their agenda in the late 80s and early 90s. And our people suffered. And the only people who responded with resistance against that was the Popular Movement for the Liberation of Angola, the MPLA in Angola, Frelimo, the National Union for Independence of Mozambique in Mozambique. And if you don't know, you should know some of the names who were involved in that. Eduardo Mondlane, people like that, people like Samora Machel, and all of the people who participated in MPLA, as well as Frelimo. Our sisters who were there, Sister Michelle as well, who participated in the guerrilla movement there in Angola, and as well as Mozambique with the Southwest African Peoples Organization, or SWAPO, Sam and Jomo, and all of the forces there who were fighting against this racist apartheid. And of course, the Zimbabwe African National Union in Zimbabwe and Robert Mugabe, they were fighting against this, along with PAC and AZAPO and ANC. And they were allowing those three liberation movements to use their land as staging areas against the racist apartheid regime. But outside of those liberation movements, no one else in the world responded to this human threat of dignity. No one else responded except the Cuban Revolution, who sent, as I mentioned, almost 500,000 troops to fight in Southern Africa. They did that, and this happened as a result of the relationships that were established in Africa by Ernesto Che Guevara when he went there in 1964 to fight in the Congo, supporting the liberation struggle that was initiated by the National Congolese Movement and Patrice Lumumba. And he stayed there several months fighting in the Congo. They were unable to uh, win control of that battle. So he went to Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, Che Guevara did, and he stayed there several months. And that's when he made contacts that ended up forming the Cuban alliance that came to Africa in the person of our brother. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. I see his face in my head. I'll think of it in a minute. But he became the Cuban commander in Africa for quite some time under the leadership of Fidel Castro. And I'm saying this again because a lot of you, those of us that are Africans, those of us that are not Africans, we will listen to these no good bastards telling us, well, Che Guevara was racist. How the hell could he, because he used the N word when he was 22, 23 years old and didn't know a goddamn thing. And you used the N word 5 minutes before you logged into this program. And yet you want to call him a racist when this man went to Africa and risked his life on the battlefield fighting for our people and put in motion the fact that we had 500,000 Cuban troops in Africa, and they were so strong, so disciplined. The white mercenaries, the racist white mercenaries under the leadership of this Mike Moore, this terrorist,
Belgian terrorists who were going around slaughtering our people. Mike Moore wrote in his memoirs that the Cuban troops were so disciplined, they had no idea how they were going to effectively drive them out of Africa. So they had to sit down and have a negotiation. And part of the negotiation is if the Cuban troops would leave, then Nelson Mandela could be freed from prison. Namibia could be granted its independence. And of course, this eventually led to Angola and Mozambique winning their anti colonial wars against Portugal as well. And eventually, in just uh, a couple of years after that, in 1994, Azania was granted its so called political independence. So the first government in post apartheid Azania came in the person of Nelson Mandela becoming president. But we think that our departed brother Khalid Abdul Muhammad, Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad, was certainly correct when he was on the Phil Donahue show that year in 1994. And Phil Donahue offered up the election of Nelson Mandela as president in Azania to illustrate progress. And Dr. Khalid Muhammad shook his head and said, where in the world does an African spend 27 years in prison, get out of prison, and become president of the country unless there's some kind of backdoor scheme taking place? And time has certainly proven that there was a lot of truth to Brother Khalid's comments that he made on the Donahue show that day. There are other forces I just want to recognize, however you see them, the economic freedom fighters in Azania, for whatever you see them, they are waging this fight as well. So all of these are liberation movements, right? Who are in Azania and they're engaging this fight. But as the slide on the screen says, uh, we got so-called political independence, but the power dynamic didn't change. In other words, these European colonizers, these European capitalists, they still maintain power in the country, despite the face of Africans in leadership. Mandela in leadership, Oliver Tambo in leadership. Today, Cyril Ramaphosa, president of the country, in leadership. We have black faces of Barack Obama as president, but we don't have the power that goes with that. We don't have the real political power and the economic power to back it. All of the industries that are in Azania today, all the car manufacturers that were there that power remained in the hands of the European capitalists. The picture on your screen, Nikki Oppenheimer, who is a descendant of the De Beers diamond empire, and who's today one of the top 5 richest people in all of Africa, his family. They didn't relinquish any of that wealth. They weren't forced to relinquish any of that wealth. They still maintain it. They're still today. De Beers continues to rob our people of the diamonds, as Shakura talked about. So this is the course of the contradiction, is that our people have this on paper free independence and freedom, just like in this backward ass country we have it on paper, independence and freedom, but there's no mechanisms in place to ensure that we have the opportunity based on our hard work, because we've always worked hard to reap the benefits of that hard work. There's nothing in place to ensure that we can do that. So this system, you got to remember, um, we were forbidden in Azania uh, to have access to resources. And as a result of that, for decades, centuries, Europeans were able to accumulate wealth and we weren't. Same as this hemisphere. Europeans were able to accumulate wealth through uh, legislation like the Homestead Act, which allowed Europeans to go wherever the hell they wanted to go in this backward country and see some land they wanted and say, I want to file the claim with the county and get the deed within days. That was illegal. You couldn't do that, African. You couldn't do that, indigenous person. You were not permitted to do that. So in this country, the process of wealth is land ownership. So if you're prohibited from owning land, you're not going to have any wealth. This is not about, well, y'all don't have any discipline in your spending. Look, I have worked too many years, and I've worked in leadership, meaning in management, for too many years. I've had too many Europeans working for me. You know, when people work for you, you know all their business because they have problems, and you know you have to work with them when they're having problems. Look, white folks don't spend money any better than we do. That's my point. They don't spend it any better than we do. Okay, but this system has created checks and balances, when where certain people, when you make a mistake, that mistake is gonna have a serious impact on you. Whereas other people, you make the same mistake, you have opportunities to correct that mistake. And that's how the system of white supremacy works. So in the 90s, after centuries of all of these types of injustices, some land reform was initially proposed. These lands were stolen from the African masses. Uh, the land that had the most potential to grow food, the land that was in the best condition to grow food, that was stolen from Africans and given to the Europeans. Not just in Azania, in Zimbabwe, where they have a land reform program as well, and in other parts of Southern Africa. Land reform, land reclamation should be taking place all over the damn world. It should take place all over Africa. Hong Kong was stolen from the Chinese by the British, and they have a time frame for when that's supposed to come back to the Chinese people. That's that they need land reclamation there to make sure that happens. Taiwan was stolen from China. They need that there. The forces who lost in the Chinese Revolution went to Taiwan and took that over. Singapore, same thing. That's why these are the places you know about, because these are the places that capitalism helped build up to give them alliances in all these regions in the world. The Americas needs land reclamation. The indigenous people need to reclaim their lands, take these lands back from these backward ass, no good bastards that stole it, and give it to the indigenous people where it rightfully belongs. The wealthy land where you can grow food. All of this land here in the San Joaquin Valley that produces uh, so much food for the world, right? One of the top food producing regions in the world, right here where we are physically. That's indigenous people's land, and they should get it back. They should organize and get it back, and we should help them do that so that they can feed. How the hell is an indigenous person sitting here in the San Joaquin Valley, one of the top food producing regions in the world, on the street homeless and not able to get a meal? That doesn't make any damn sense. How the hell can an African in Soweto, the township in Johannesburg and Azania, be sitting on the corner not able to get food, one of the richest mineral countries in the world, and all these no good bastards coming over here talking about they're committing genocide against the most whiny ass people in the history of human civilization? They're committing genocide against us, and we're not safe there. We have to come to America where there's crackers like us who want to steal everything, and we can unite with them because we're all no good bastards. That's what this is. That's the only thing going on right now. And without question, the lying claims by these racist Europeans that there's a genocide. Look it up, and don't just listen to us. I turned on the TV, and there was another one of these no good scum suckers on there on TV, and the sister she was so polite. She was trying to tell him that there's no real evidence of a genocide in Azania. And this no good bum was on there. Well, what are you? She told him correctly, because I've done the research, and you should do it on your own too. For the last 30 years, you know how many white people have been killed in Azania as it relates to land conflict? 20 in the last 30 years. That's not even one person a year. That's not even one person a year. You know how many Africans have been killed in land conflicts in Azania over the last 30 years? About almost 3,000. Okay, so if there's anybody that has the right to claim that they're being attacked and targeted, it's our people, not these no good bastards that you see in this picture on the screen holding the American flag. They don't, they'll sell out. I mean, it makes sense because they're colonizers. So why wouldn't they? They go to Azania, they're Afrikaners, they're Boers in Azania, but then they come here, now they're Americans because they don't care. They don't have any it's just all about opportunism and self-interest. But there's clearly no genocide. In Zimbabwe, there haven't even been that many white people killed in the last 30 years. So there's crime in Azania. Yeah, there's a big crime problem. No question about that. But how could there not be a crime problem? You have stolen this land and brutalized the natural occupants of it for hundreds of years. Of course, there's going to be upheaval and unrest. Of course, there's going to be, you've viciously exploited and oppressed those people. You've given most of them no options to survive other than engaging in petty criminal behavior against one another. Of course, there's going to be crime. You didn't give a damn about that until some of that spilled over into your damn community. Now you got to go and get all these people and bring them over here. I mean, this is at some point we have to get to the point where we're like, that's enough. We're not dealing with this anymore. We're going to wake up and do what we have to do to solve this problem, right? 20 of them have died on farms, and several times as many Africans have lost their lives because of that. Meanwhile, the masses of Africans in Azania still dominate the bottom of that society. These white folks haven't seen a hard day's work their whole life, and they won't see it here. They'll come here and get all these benefits and won't have to do a damn thing. And all the while that's happening, they'll be sitting there talking about how we're the lazy ones. Well, we're the criminals. Look at the picture of these people on this screen. They're the goddamn criminals. They're the terrorists. They're the criminals. They're the thugs. That's what you want to know what a thug looks like. That's what it looks like right there. That's the living definition of a thug. You're not going to confuse us with this nonsense. We know better. We know what's going on out here. These are the goddamn thugs that need to be locked up, along with the person that brought them over here. All of them are no good bastards and thugs and criminals. None of them. We don't have respect for any one of them. I have as much respect for them as they have for us. Zero. And that's the reason why they're sensing some pressure to have to live in a society that doesn't cater and center you on everything. They have to get up and come here because they can still have that happen here because we haven't woken up enough to put enough stiff resistance against them around that. Instead, a lot of us are trying to integrate with them and be like them. A bunch of no good, worthless pieces of you know what. So many of our people trying to say everything we can, like Malcolm X said 60 years ago, these celebrities say everything the white man wants them to say. That's what Malcolm said in 1964. And that's what these coons on social media are doing now because they see a payday. And in Azania, during the liberation movement, what they were doing is they were throwing tar on the traitors, the confirmed traitors, putting tires around them and throwing tar on them and setting them on fire. And I think that I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but I'm saying that all these traitors we got here, something has to be done at some point as we organize for liberation, because these people are going to stand in our way. They're ready to sell us out to stand with these no good scum that you see on this picture here because it's profitable. The same way these scum wanted to come here because they could see some benefit. These coons, these Negroes, these jigaboo gorillas who are playing buck dancing for white supremacy, they want the same thing, to be able to get these resources on the backs of our people. All of these scum on the backs of our people. That's what they're trying to do. So any crime conditions in Azania today have to be credited to the thugs who created the criminal conditions in the first place. They have to be credited to the people who created the imbalance in the first place. Don't come to me talking about no African selling no drugs, whether it's in Azania or here or anywhere on earth. Don't come to me talking about that. I don't, even if the African kills somebody to sell the drugs. I don't just talk to me about that. Even if the African kills me to sell the drugs, don't talk to my family about that, because that's not even the point. The point is, what are the conditions? There is no 3, 4, 5-year-old child walking around here today. When I grew up, I want to be houseless. When I grew up, I want to be addicted to drugs. When I grew up, I want to be a drug dealer. Nobody says that when they're a child. These are the conditions that exist that have pushed so many of our people into this reality. And I still don't see, even though I don't agree with their behavior, and I work with them every day, trying to create conditions so that that behavior can change. But I'm also clear on the fact that all they're doing is following the example that this backward system gave them. Because the people who own everything got it by stealing, by killing, by robbing, by being immoral. Everybody that's on your money is an immoral bastard. Each and every one, from George Washington, Jefferson, each and every one of them was immoral, rapists, raping our women, all of them. Criminals, thugs, crooks, Abraham Lincoln too. All of them were criminals, thugs, and crooks. So our people are looking at them, and these are the people that are being held up as the forefathers and the people that deserve the respect and that the country's built on. So they're like, well, let me imitate them, because clearly that's how you get ahead in these backward societies. So we got to look at who created these conditions, because that's where the blame belongs. That's who should get all of the blame, all of that. And then the last thing that has to be said about that is that when you got to understand the difference between colonizing land and land reclamation. Colonizing land is when you violently steal other people's land who haven't been violent against you. You just come in and steal their land, kill their people, rape everybody, and you engage in a systemic effort to create a system of dominance that will continue to serve your interests. That's what colonization is. That's why colonialism is relevant in 2025. And that's why you crackers and graham crackers who keep trying to bring up slavery existed in every country. That's why that's not relevant. There's nothing about slavery 10,000 years ago that impacts anybody's life today. There's everything about colonialism and the slavery that colonialism produced that has shaped the world we live in today. But if you don't know that, then you'll listen to them and you'll be vomiting out that nonsense. So that's what colonialism looks like, the theft of land. Land reclamation is those lands that the colonizers stole. It is restorative justice, saying we're going to take those lands back and give them to the people that they uh, justifiably belong to. So this is the same as if you go out today and someone's carjacks you and steals your car, and maybe we can't find the people that did it, but your children, after you pass on, we will come to a point where we have the ability to provide justice. So we provide a car to your children. That's justice. That's what that is. And that's what land reclamation is. And these crackers should be glad that it's land reclamation, because we want revolution where we don't sit down and negotiate with you about a damn thing. We organize and take back what you stole from us. That's what we're going to do. So you better take advantage of these humane conditions that are existing around this land reclamation question, because someday soon we are going to be organized, and you won't be placed from your land into another comfortable place like what has happened. Even in Azania, that's what's happened. They didn't kick the white folks out on the streets when what lands were taken. They should have. They had every right to say, get there. You got 20 hours to pack your stuff up and get the hell out. Well, what are we going to do? Well, the same thing that our people had to do when you did that to us. Figure it out. We didn't do that. We gave them comfortable places to live. That's what I'm saying. You can't, these no grateful bastards that, they've had everything centered around them. And it's never enough for these people. That's why you have a whole generation of African people that don't want to hear any of that sellout nonsense at all. Don't want to have any empathy for people that don't have any empathy for them. And they have every right to see the world that way. Every right. So that's what we're talking about when we say this. You got to know the difference between the two. And so, in summary, let's just say that the only genocide happening is the continued subjugation of lands by European thieves under the same savage type alliance that saw Jan Smuts, the ambassador, the premier, prime minister of then South Africa 100 years ago, uniting with Shame Wiseman, who was the leader of the World Zionist Congress at that time, and Lord Balfour, who was the Lord leader of Britain. These three, this axis of evil, united to create the illegal Balfour Declaration that officially colonized Palestine. And that opened the floodgates for these Europeans from Europe, these so-called Ashkenazi Jews, to invade Palestine and begin to occupy it. It was a colonial project. That's what it was. It's the same system that allowed for the theft of these lands and all of the boarding schools, the Homestead Act, the reservations, all the efforts to move the indigenous people off of their lands and control their lands here to steal Mexico from the indigenous people there. You know, Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, California, where we are right now, these were all a part of Mexico before these goddamn crackers stole that from them. All of that. That's the continued genocide. That's what that looks like. And then the people suffering going into all of the countries in Central and South America and completely devastating their economies through the International Monetary Fund's brutal capitalist, imperialist focused policies of creating industrialization to benefit capitalism and doing nothing to benefit the everyday needs of the local people, and using what limited resources these countries have to service these international monetary fund loans while taking money away from essential social services. This is what's been happening for the last 30 years in Mexico, in El Salvador, in Guatemala, Honduras, all of these countries, Panama. That's why the people are coming here. And then you engage in illegal attacks and sanctions against the revolution in Venezuela, where people can't get anything to eat because you're trying to starve out the revolution. That's why the people are coming. And but yet we don't know anything about any of that. So these crackers come to us and they say, well, these people are coming here and they're taking jobs away from you. And we're so goddamn stupid. We won't. Yeah, that's right. They taking our jobs. I saw a black coon on social media this morning. They taking our jobs. Coon. I wish I had his phone number. I would have called him up and said, Coon, you didn't have no goddamn job. These crackers ain't hiring you to do nothing. You don't have no, the cotton is picked, fool. It's been picked for 150 years. They don't need your black ass anymore. That's why you're unemployed. It has absolutely nothing to do with the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. I'm sorry, I'm sick of this nonsense. I'm sick of this. I'm 63 years old. I've been hearing this bullshit my whole life, and I don't understand why so many of you are okay with this. I mean, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of hearing this. This is nothing but a bunch of nonsense. So, current events in the Sahel, for example, the region in Africa, from, you go from Nigeria, Guinea Bissau, all the way east to Ethiopia. That region is called the Sahel region. The Congo, hotspot. The Sudan, hotspot. The Horn, Somalia, Djibouti, Ethiopia, hotspots, right? Southern Africa, hotspots. All of this, if you're paying any attention, should make it clear that Pan-African consciousness is rising. And if you don't believe it, all you have to do is pay attention to African Liberation Day last weekend. I've been in the All African People's Revolutionary Party for 41 years. As of this past African Liberation Day, I have never seen the fervor in Africa for African Liberation Day that I saw last weekend. It's my 41st African Liberation Day. I've never seen it heightened to the level that it was last weekend. That's a warning to you. That's a warning to you. Our people are sick of this nonsense, and we're not going to take it anymore. I saw a video. The brother was saying he was in Burkina Faso, and he was saying they asked him, well, what's the solution? One of the European media sources. He's a young brother, like in his 20s. He said the solution is that Africans all over the continent, we have to unite. He said all of our brothers and sisters in Europe, he said in the US, have to come home. And then the white man asked him, well, what after that? He said, then we need to drive you the hell out of here. That's what he said. And I'm like, obviously, it's not that simple. You know, we have a plan. We have a Pan-Africanist plan, but the consciousness is coming in our direction. It's coming here. And whether we see it or not, the colonizers definitely see it. So that's why they're consolidating themselves. That's why they invited those worthless pieces of trash over here from Azania, because they realize they have to consolidate themselves. The white right, racist right, is consolidating itself. They know they have to try their best to do. They can't get along with each other, but they have to at least try, and that's what they're doing because they see the handwriting on the wall, right? They have to close ranks as best as they can. So our job is to continue to organize to reclaim our mother Africa. That's clearly the center of the struggle. It's not in the US, not New York, not LA, none of that nonsense. It's mother Africa. And we have to reclaim our mother Africa by any means necessary. So we want to thank you for coming. We want to invite you back next week, June 8th. Our program is going to be focused on why everybody owes the Black Power movement in this country respect. Everybody owes. We're going to explain to you why that's the case. The 1960s Black Power movement, why you owe it respect. Whether I don't even know any black people, you still owe us respect more than your brain will ever be big enough to understand. And the QR code in the upper left hand, the red and white one, again, it has all our programs on it, AAPRP programs, some of the other ones like, and then we also have the Forward Ever Shop. Continue to buy merchandise that supports our efforts to build our revolutionary work. Okay, and then go to hoodcommunist.org. Revolutionary Pan-African blog. Please support that. We want to tell you that those of you who are here in Sacramento, we have an event coming up, a teach-in on June 16th to talk about what's happening in Burkina Faso and Brother Ibrahim Traoré and what's going on there. So come on out. It's at 3320 Broadway in Sacramento on June 16th from 6 to 8. We'll have some food available there. All are welcome. And also, I mentioned we have these self-defense classes. I'll have information on that next week for those of you in this area who are interested in attending that as well. I have supports African Liberation Day still up there because you still should support. We have bills. We had African Liberation Day all over the African continent. So you should scan that QR code and make a contribution if you haven't done that already. And even if you have, you still should do it. You should join the All African People's Revolutionary Party, aprp-intl.org. Go there and get more information on how to do that. One of the programs in Burkina Faso and now in Niger that the party is functionally working on the ground to organize is Burkina Books and Niger Books. So go to that black and white QR code in the bottom right and become a monthly sponsor for that. We're building the work. It's a beautiful thing, you all. And please buy my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, only $8 US. You can only buy it on Amazon. I don't want to hear it. Just support the revolution. Please get the book, buy as many, get book clubs and do it. I have to buy materials for these self-defense classes so that people can spar. So really all 100% of the proceeds I get from book sales go to that. So please help me. I'm not getting proceeds. I'm coming out of pocket. And if I have to do that, I can only do it so much. So help us expand the work. Help us expand the work. So please get the book. Tell people, even if you got the book, get a book club together and read the book and have them order the book and do several of those. I mean, that's a great contribution if you can do that. There's no reason why anyone can't do that. I mean, that's a great contribution to do that. Don't just buy the book, read it yourself, never talk to anybody about it and think you did something. That's nothing. You know, that you die, the information dies with you. We have to build capacity. So we need you to help us do this work. We need you to help us do it. So we thank you for joining us. Forward ever, backwards never. Enjoy the rest of your day.